You're listening to Love and Light with Dr. Lisa, Everyday Living in Peace. Day-to-day living can be difficult in our world today, and most people don't know how to live a peaceful, joy-filled existence. The key to this is simple: love. Join me, Dr. Lisa Collins, for the next hour as I unpack and identify the need for a peaceful, love-filled existence by engaging the challenging and hard topics of life. On this show, you will lean into the healing practices that enlarge your spiritual reality through the act of love. This kind of love begins with yourself and your neighbor and transcends age, race, sex, generation, class, and sexual identity. The world changes when we root ourselves in love. Love and Light with Dr. Lisa starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa, and you're listening to Love and Light, living every day in peace on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience how to bring more love into your everyday life. Each second and fourth Wednesday, 1 p.m. Pacific, 12 Mountain, and 4 Eastern, we will have tools for living every day in peace. The culture of today's world is about number one. How am I going to take care of what I need for myself, for my family, for me? We know that connectedness between us is greater, and healing. How do I care about others? Should I even care what's going on with my neighbor? Am I my sister's keeper? Where I welcome my spiritual sister, Nikki Weaver, who is her sister's keeper, as she brings love and light to women in custody on the inside. Nikki Weaver, who is the executive director of On the Inside, which is an organization that creates community for women. And Nikki has been described as an artist, healer, I love this, mover, shaker. I could say so much more about you, Nikki, but I'm just going to read a little bit more of your bio because I just want the listeners to know exactly who we have with us today. Nikki's an innovative creator, a passionate communicator. She desires to see other people's point of view. She brings a sense of listening, curiosity, an open heart. I have been witness to all of this. She believes in empowering women through connection to our bodies, each other, and our spirits. Wow. Welcome to Love and Light, living every day in peace, Nikki.
Oh, thank you so much, Lisa. That's going to make me cry just hearing you talk about me. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here. Yeah, and to be in your company.
So wonderful to have you. And you are another one of the people out there who are light workers, out there doing the work with your whole heart, with your whole self. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your journey. And I've seen your work as an artist, a leader in educational arts, expression for children from K to 12, amazing work with Shakespeare with children and community at Portland Playhouse, leading the way and building a collective community. And now On the Inside. How did you get to this place?
I want to say by chance, by luck, and just one foot at a time. But as most of us know, there's so much more to the journey, right? And really, one of the things that you speak to, Lisa, and that you exude, I believe, is this sense of being rooted in love and leading from that center and that place. And I really believe that was something that I was given at a young age by my mother. And a lot of this journey comes from my mother and her sort of paving the way. I grew up in Los Angeles in California, and she worked in maximum security in a men's facility prison. And, way back in the day, I used to sit on the floor inside the facility and draw with crayons when she was teaching, and she taught literature and drama. And, it was the sort of time when there was a mirrored sort of window wall, and she had the pager on her hip. And so if anything happened, she would page the guard who was supposedly sitting outside, And what I remember witnessing is this one memory that I often refer back to is she was showing my VHS, remember those old videos? And as she was showing that, she was showing them Bambi, and she was talking about parental differences and dynamic and how many of these men had parental figures in their lives that they looked up to or felt lost. And what I remember was watching grown men cry and start to weep and also hold each other in a way that I'd never experienced. And just that tiny little fragment of a memory sort of lodged itself somewhere in my body. And, fast forward, I like to think too that the way I found my light was really coming out of darkness. My mother died when I was 10. I moved 10 days later after her death to Australia. I started living with my father, who's an alcoholic. And before that, my parents were divorced. And so this quick death of my mother, moving to a new country to live with a man that I didn't really know, I started to unpack my trauma. And really those pieces of me started to show up more and more in the work that I wanted to start to make. And the embodiment, this idea of looking at our bodies as a vehicle for transformation, to understand. I started running, I started yoga. I later became a yoga teacher and massage therapist. And what I started to understand and unpack was that the bodies hold stories, even if we're not ready to voice them. And so that's always been something I've been curious about when I'm either in theater or watching other people on stage or even films, of what is it that the body and the voice connect to. And sometimes we can see in somebody else that their voice is connected to their bodies. And other times you hear somebody speak and it sounds like they're having a total out of body experience. And I got really interested in wanting to sort of look at that. What is the bridge between being in our bodies and using our voice? So that's a little bit of my story, and the move to Australia. I started studying theater, and then theater eventually brought me back to the United States in 2005, which is when I started really studying Shakespeare and looking at Shakespeare as a vehicle to connect voice to large experiences, death, rage, love, and how the body could hold stories, but also learn to share them. And I really credit a lot of that work for not teaching me how to act, but teaching me how to speak the truth. And that's really sort of how this work of On the Inside began, is thinking about, some of us make art inside a black box, a theater, and how might we begin to give art its greater purpose and share it more widely. And the work of coming back to work with incarcerated women, something that began in 2018. And I really didn't remember that my mom had done this work until around that time, when somebody asked me, what it was I was doing. And I heard somebody else speak about their own work inside prison facilities. And when I voiced, oh, my mom used to do that work, many people sitting at this table said, really, I've never, ever heard you mention that, Nikki. And so there was this large piece of me that I believe started to awaken, really, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time sitting inside Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, Oregon's female, facility here, I felt really at home, and really what I started to understand, I think, sitting in that circle, was there are so many labels that we put on ourselves, whether somebody either gives them to us or we tell ourselves we're not enough, we're a failure, whatever it is that we start to believe. What if, rather than believing our labels to be true and sort of holding the story of what you did was a bad thing, what if you started to look at really who you were? And that's really when I sit in circles with women. I say, I don't care about what you did. I care about who you are in this moment. And that's where we begin.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. And it just touches into so many of the things that I know that I've learned about myself through interpersonal neurobiology, through trauma healing, through racial healing, that I've learned about myself, was really like not about the critic and the voice that I think is mine, but I just ask, whose voice is that? And to build that bridge of love inside an institution where we have many women, men, and children in institutions. And to let them know that we haven't forgot about you. Like, I care about you. Like that sense of, I've watched you work with kids. I've seen you worked with, I've seen your work. And when I first heard of this work that you're doing now, it was actually on the radio. You were doing it was a radio show on your work. And I just thought, wow, I mean, the light that you're shining, like, am I my sister's keeper? Well, to Nikki Weaver, yes, I am. And in this time, Nikki, in this pandemic, how can you how is that in the forefront with so many other needs?
Mm. Because, you know, one thing that it makes me think of, Lisa, is that we're all isolated, and this pandemic has really taught us that of how do we show up and who do we want to show up for. And, you know, one of the things that I start to think about is when life seems hard or I feel stuck, I think, well, I'm not inside a cell. I'm not living inside a cell. It might be the cell of my mind. It might
Mm-hmm.
be my own confinement that I'm putting on, whatever the situation is. But that there are many of us that need help and need to be reminded that we're connected to each other. And, you know, I often used to think about that in undergrad and then graduate school, of we sort of create these little bubbles and you think the whole world is happening inside this bubble. And yet you sort of step outside the classroom or the
Yeah.
walls and you're like, wow, I didn't know there was a war happening. I didn't know there were homeless people living right here. That once we step outside our bubbles, creating that bridge to connect our stories and sharing them with women that are serving time, because at some point they're going to get released and they're going to join our communities, you know. And if they're not getting released, if they are serving life, they need to learn also too that they can better themselves even if that's where they're spending their time. Yeah.
Wow. Powerful. Very powerful.
Mm.
Wow. I mean, that went very quickly. We're time for our first break. You're listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, and our guest, Nikki Weaver, Executive Director of On the Inside, an organization that brings creativity and well-being into women's prisons. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue to explore this fascinating subject on healing for others. We'll be right back. We're back on Love and Light, Living Every Day in Peace, and my guest, Nikki Weaver, Executive Director of On the Inside, an organization that brings creativity and well-being into women's prisons. But before we continue, I want to make sure everyone knows, if you want more information about On the Inside, Nikki, where can people go?
You can find us on Instagram, on the inside, and the number 2, all one word, or you can find us on our website, ontheinside.space. Those are probably the 2 quickest ways to find us. We also do LinkedIn and Facebook sometimes.
Awesome. Awesome. So we were talking about you know, Am I My Sister's Keeper, and about your experience of working with your mom and who you lost at an early age, and you finding yourself. I love what you said about coming out of darkness, and what does that look like? And when you work with women in prison, like
Mm.
how does it all work?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lisa. One of the images that I think of, I often think visually, is in circles, really, that we begin somewhere and we end somewhere, but that they continue. So really, that's what the space looks like, that we always set the chairs up in circles. Women have the opportunity to come into the circle and then find center of the circle and also step outside the circle. But the invitation is to always stay in the room. Part of the way the work begins is with a check-in where we ask people to share anything they need to say to be present. And also part of that is also saying each other's names. If you've worked inside at all, you might know that you get called by a number or by your last name. So we ask
Yes.
women to start with sharing their name or a nickname, something that they would like to be called whenever we're working together. And saying somebody's name, as a lot of us know, begins to build connection, rapport. So the check-in is anything you need to say to be present, my name, and then saying your name, Dr. Lisa, somebody else's name sitting next to you in the circle afterwards, so that you can begin to move through the work. After check-in, usually we do some sort of embodiment, some sort of get up on your feet, a dance, a yoga stretch. Sometimes I lead it, sometimes other facilitators lead it, sometimes each of the women in the circle lead a stretch or pose. And really it starts with getting into the bodies, but also into our voices. So we might start with some sort of vocal exercises, stepping outside the circle where we make space. And one of the things that I often think about in the room is that we make space for all voices to be heard. And I can lead with a lot of love in saying, all right, you've said enough, we're moving on. The person next to you is going to speak now. You've had enough space today. So I do shut people up when I lead with love, and I really practice sort of building that rapport into each class so that we're all taking up space in a way that feels equal. I think about circling back to after we've been up on our feet, we might then begin to explore some text or themes. And with your show being about light, that's one of the first classes that we have, Lisa, where we talk about light and darkness. And we talk about what does that look like in your body? Where today do you feel more connected? If I was going to ask you today, are you drawn more towards the light or towards the darkness? Why? Do we need both? Can we find balance in both? So we do a lot of conversation exploring, and sometimes it's on our feet. If the sunrise was over here and darkness, the middle of the night was over here, where would you find yourself in the room? Why would that be? And then really one of the exercises out of that first class is to write a poem about the light and darkness that you carry, and then to come back the next week and share that aloud. And some women memorize it, and some women stand up and read it. Some women ask if me or someone else in the room can read it. And then the practice is really to begin to embody words. So as we know, when we memorize something, it finds a way to live inside of us, that your words would sound different than mine, even if we were sharing the same text. And the idea with embodying it is that they might begin to put simple gestures to it. So when you say the word love, what does that feel like? Is there a part of your body that you would touch? Would it be your heart? Would you drop to your knees? So we begin to explore basic movement that might connect them more deeply to the text. And then the invitation is, again, to step into the center of the circle, to let yourself be seen and to be heard.
Wow.
Yeah.
And sounds like a lot of risk.
And it does usually start with laughter and some swearing, where the women often say, "Oh, really, Nikki?" But over time, there's more and more that's revealed with each person. And when you take a risk, I feel more willing to take a risk. And when you share something that's vulnerable, I begin to share something that's vulnerable. And at the end of sort of each person working, and the invitation is always to work aloud in front of other women, and then to sit down and to share sort of feedback responses. What did you notice about Dr. Lisa? What seemed challenging? What would you like more of? Yeah. And then the person, the artist, I call them artists, they're up to them to decide what they might want to offer next time. You know what? I'm gonna do it again, and I'm gonna dance. This time I'm gonna do the whole thing, and I'm gonna do it without text. This time next week I'm gonna memorize it. And then that's usually how the work begins and sort of moves through from movement, from finding our voice, to sharing sort of personal stories through a creative prompt is often what I call them, out of brainstorming into some text or piece. And then, then we find a way to reinforce, to close the work out. So the reinforcement and the check-in come from Shakespeare and Company, and the reinforcement is intentionally positive, and it's about something that happened during our time together. And it could be about yourself or someone else in the room, something that you're taking with you into your day or into your week. And it really just begins with that. I'm Nikki, and again, saying your name, I reinforce Dr. Lisa's smile. It makes me want to smile, and then I'll pass to somebody else. Yeah. And so that's how we close out our work together. And often there's homework that accompanies the next class.
Homework.
So. Yeah, that's one of my favorite words these days, homework. And that's an interesting thing about teaching inside facility. When you have time on your hands and you're with yourself 24/7, there's a lot that moves through the body. And when I first started doing this work, that before women were writing their own pieces, I would bring in poetry, Dr. Lisa, and each woman got a folder of poetry, and we would sort of, in similar vein, talk about the work. Each woman would pick a stanza or a phrase that they resonated with, and then they were asked to learn it and find a way to embody it, to put it on its feet, is what I call how. And then together, the class would recite the poem in the order that it was written. And then the invitation back then was, to take this poem and work on it in your cell or on your unit, and come back next week and see if you can embody the entire piece of text. And that's really when the magic started, is that the following week, the class that I had back in 2018, when they came back, one by one, they would stand in the center of the circle, and almost all of them could recite and embody the entire poem from the week before. And that's when I started to recognize, right, that language transports us. Sometimes somebody else's language says and speaks the things that we're unable to speak for ourselves. So it became this great gift for me to witness, and also to see that the women were transported outside of prison facilities when they were working.
Wow. That is so So very powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, what were you like? I know some of the work that I do, and I know that it's light work.
Mm-hmm.
It just blows me away. Were
Mm-hmm.
you completely like
Mm-hmm.
blown away?
Well, yes, yes, Lisa. And that's the strangest thing. Sometimes I feel this in theater, but lots of times I feel this working inside prison because you're isolated. I mean, you're contained in a room where there's often no windows, and you're the only one working in a group of 8 or 35, and you're not able to record or, send emails or call Dr. Lisa on the phone and be like, you got to listen to this. You can recount these stories, but you are stepping into another world.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I've often sort of thought it's a whole experience to work inside different facilities. It feels like a real gift to be given an opportunity to see somebody at their lowest and witness their rise.
I love that. And
Mm-hmm.
hold them. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk often about, and it's really part of my mission and vision, the oneness that we have with one another, and that a lot of the strife we have about what one person has done and those people over there, it's like, if Nikki's hurting, I'm hurting.
Mm-hmm.
It's us. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have people that are in prison, other women are in
Mm-hmm.
prison,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in prison in a sense. And so
Yeah.
that connectedness, you are illuminated that connectedness, and then not even to speak about the womanhood and sisterhood of
Mm-hmm.
being there and holding that sacred space for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's way past spiritual.
Mm. Oh, thank you, Dr. Lisa. It's true what you say, that this oneness, that idea of unity or connection, allows us all to grow. And one of the things I think about examples of that right now is working in the Wyoming Women's Center. The class that we teach is all over Zoom due to COVID, and one of the things that the women have to do in one of the first classes is they have to share and write down 2 brags about themselves, not about their children or anyone else in their life, but about themselves. And often I sort of frame that it can be as deep or as shallow as pleaseth you. I make the best quiche, I'm the best kisser, whatever it is. And then they have to share them aloud to a room full of women. And that's scary and vulnerable. And then they usually laugh their heads off about it. And then there's some great conversation, right, that comes out of that. Wow, I didn't know you, or, oh, I see that in you. um, and what I gave them 2 weeks ago, because I'm really interested in how do we change the culture to sort of think about oneness, to think about unity, to be our sisters keepers, is I said to the women, I said, okay, so now this week you have to collect 5 shameless brags about other women on your unit that are not in this class. And their faces sort of fell. And I said, no, I'm serious. You better come back next week with 5 shameless brags about other women on your units. And they went to town, and they had a blast trying to learn about other women. And they came back with these great stories about the conversations that fell out and women that they'd never talked to. And I didn't know she could do blah, blah, blah. It shifted something inside, Lisa, and I could see it when they came back to the room.
Wow. I mean, absolutely amazing, Nikki. What's coming up for me right now is I think like your mother, your mother has to be like, right. Can you hear her voice?
I can, and I'll tell you a tiny story about that when we come back from this next break.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Well, you're listening to Love and Light with Dr. Lisa, and we are coming up on a break. I'm here with Nikki Weaver, who is an amazing mover and shaker and the executive director of On the Inside, an organization that brings love and light into women's prisons. We'll be right. We're back on Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, and I have Nikki Weaver, the executive director of On the Inside, an organization that brings creativity, well-being into women's prison to find joy, creativity, and wellness. Thank you, Nikki. Where can people find On the Inside? What do they have to look for?
You can find us on Instagram, On the Inside, and then the number 2, or you can find us on our website, www.ontheinside.space.
Awesome. we were just talking about this transformational work and some of the structures and how it all works. And I was saying right before the break, like, Nikki, you have to feel your mom, not have to, but do you feel your mom when you're doing this work?
I definitely do. And one of the things I've started saying, Dr. Lisa, is that I believe she sits in every circle that we make, and I think that's true of anybody that we've lost or that's sitting outside of prison facilities, that they all are with us, whether we know it or not, whether we carry them in our backs or they're front and center. But that was very apparent back in 2019, working on a piece of theater at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. A woman that's serving a life sentence said to me at the final sort of check-in reinforcement when we were kind of closing out our production, she turned and she said, I hope you know that your mom is here and it's not a mistake that you're sitting in this circle with us. And I, started weeping, Dr. Lisa. And it's very surprising and also not surprising that sometimes women that are inside can see me more closely than some of my family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a great level of awareness and also stories that are carried and held there. But it was, one of the most generous, I think, compliments anybody has ever given me.
Mm-hmm. Wow. In the spiritual connection. I mean, this sense of womanhood and being able to be there for our sisters who are serving time, women in custody. And so I know that this is just talking to you is transformational for me. And I completely support this work. I do. Can you share some of the stories of the transformation?
Yeah. Well, and I'll just go back to her for a minute. Her serving this life sentence. One of the things that happened, she's been a student since 2018, and she started coming to that first sort of poetry and theater group, is what I called it. And she was one of the women that would always sort of learn and embody and come back and sort of put on its feet the poem. And over time, sort of that class built to asking the women to start writing or sharing their own stories as poems, as skits, as songs, dance. And she said to me, she said, Nikki, I don't know if I can be in the show, if we're going to create something public. I'm famous for the wrong reasons. And I said, I said, there's many ways that you can participate without people having to know it's you. You can write and it can be anonymous. Somebody else can read or share your work. We could record it. We could create a piece of music, or you could tell me about music that you like, and we could have that in the show. So we sort of just started brainstorming together. And then one day she told me that she played piano. And I said, well, do you have access to a piano? And she said, well, there's a keyboard I can use sometimes, And so I said, well, I'll start bringing in a keyboard every class we have, and you can play the keyboard. And so she started playing the keyboard. And I mean, talk about a pianist, Dr. Lisa, that could play almost anything the instant she sort of looked at the music. It was stunning. And what started to happen was, as the other women were sharing their stories and reading in front of the group, she would just start underscoring. And she would start to play music that sort of, your piece, Dr. Lisa, seems like it's kind of somber and deep. Did you like what I was doing? And she was really always sort of over in the corner doing her own thing, but then would participate in that way. And, as we got closer to the performance, I said to her, so, what do you think? Would you like to be in the show as the pianist and, continue to underscore? And, she asked permission from all of the women. She really wanted to make sure that she wasn't front and center. Could she be in the show without having her name or photos taken of her? And she played all of our shows that way. And her family came to the second show that we did for outside guests. And her father was there, and her sister and her nephew. And they came up and said, whatever is happening here, this is God's work. And this has been more healing for her than any therapy that she's had while she's been incarcerated. And that for me, Lisa, was one of those love and light moments where something sort of went through me that I thought, I have to find a way to do more of this. And, at the time, this was not a nonprofit. It was a theater class that I was sort of teaching through Portland Playhouse. And it really made me think about, how do we do more of this? And that was really the beginning of this nonprofit turning to on the inside of creating more programming and finding more ways to build connection.
Wow, that is very powerful in God's work. To watch spirit work like that through you, through your life of your mom, and to go into places where people don't want to go, or even think about going. I'll be going virtually today to the Oregon Youth Authority. We have so many youth that are behind bars, so to speak. And, just to the message of like, I've not forgot about you.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. Lisa, I'm curious from your point of view, why do people not want to work with incarcerated women, men, youth? Why is that? Why do we shove them aside and pretend like they don't exist?
I think that we don't connect to it's us, the oneness. And I think that some of the stories are tragic and sad, and people get re-traumatized about their own stories. But one thing that I know for sure is that this hump that we have to get over is oneness. It's like we have to pay attention to what's happening with our children. We have to pay attention to people who are, I love what Fanta Davis said when she talked about Dr. Martin Luther King, and she talked about justice. Justice is love. That is justice. Justice transforms. Love transforms that which is ill. Love is the bridge. I mean, and that is exactly what I see your work doing. We need more people to do it. I want the listeners to know, like, wherever you are, where if you can hear my voice, we need your help. And on the inside, definitely could use more people to help create this community and transform lives. And I think too, Nikki, that people think like, oh, not me, I can't do it.
Yeah.
But how easy is it for people to participate?
It's very easy, and my core belief really is that stories save us, your own, mine. And the more we get comfortable sharing them with a friend, in our journals, in front of a circle of incarcerated women, the more we understand that I learn something every time I hear somebody else's story. I learn something about myself and the world. And it changes the way we treat each other. And in that, I'll say that the way we practice learning and sharing stories is we run a 4-class series that's for women outside a facility, and it's all virtual, all over Zoom. They're 2-hour sessions where we create together, we move a little bit together, we center or meditate. And through that class series, you have the opportunity to hear and learn and see work from women that are incarcerated. And we do that through screen sharing and through reading their work aloud. And really, it's as simple as we create from the same set of prompts that the women that are incarcerated are creating from. So the example of light and darkness in our 4-class series that's currently running, our group just created those poems. And then when we meet for the second session, they share their poems one at a time. And then Carol and I, who was incarcerated at Coffee Creek and works with us directly, she reads poems from the women inside facility. And if there's drawings or artwork, we share those too. And then really the gift that we give as women on the outside is, with your permission, we share your poem with the women that are serving time, so that they get to see, here's Dr. Lisa's poem that she wrote, at her home this past week. And they can respond to that through our supervisors and then through letter writing, like a pen pal. So it's this way of building this bridge of looking at our similarities and our differences, but building a bridge of connection.
Wonderful. I mean, and so when I'm thinking of transformation, what's coming up for me right now is there's transformation for those who participate. There's transformation for those who may be the administrator that's helping you to go in. There's transformation for families who see their family members growing or being able to connect to the light or to whatever part of them that was dormant before. We're talking about transformation across the board to whoever comes, like a neural net touches the side of this joy. There's
Yeah.
transformation everywhere.
It's true, and a great example of that too is the Wyoming Women's Center, where we're teaching all virtually. It does appear to be like orange is the new black. All the women are in orange, the matching orange face mask. We're up on the screen like God looking down into this room of women, and it's very hard to tell who's sharing. So they stand up and they wave their hands and step forward so that we can understand who's sharing their piece. But one of the things that happened is after the first class we had with them, the supervisor, one of the caseworkers, leaned across the screen and she said, "Whatever you're doing here, could you do this for me and my team of caseworkers?" I mean, and she didn't understand really what we were doing, Lisa, right? I mean, she just saw the transformation in the room with these women, asking them to collect brags right inside your folder, as many as you can. Next week, you have to hold up your folder and we have to see that the inside is filled with brags about you and the women in your units, and
Wow.
that shifted something in the culture. Yeah.
Wow. What the work that you are doing is past amazing. I've always felt that way about you before you did this, but I
Oh.
just I mean, sister, really just
Mm.
it is just so I just have tears in my eyes just knowing that what you're doing and that we need more of it. If you're listening, it's time for a break. Before we have a tear fest together, you're listening to Love and Light with Dr. Lisa, with me, Dr. Lisa, and we'll continue to talk about this healing that Nikki Weaver is doing as the executive director, leading on the inside, helping be a healer inside of women's prisons. Stay tuned. We're back on Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa. I'm just so honored and overwhelmed. So many feelings that are. I told Nikki I am not supposed to cry here, Nikki. We have Nikki Weaver, the executive director from On the Inside, and we're talking about healing inside women's prisons. How can people reach you? What's your social media handle, Nikki?
Yeah, you can find us on the Inside #2 on Instagram. That's the best one to find us on these days, or at our website, www.ontheinside.space.
So, I mean, we were just talking at the end of our last segment about how transformational all of this work is. And Nikki, you were saying really, you're holding space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that idea that presence is really the greatest gift you can give someone, and that many of these women, or even myself included, to have somebody really listen to you without interrupting you, and to then ask questions and to help you understand why you have this feeling or why you grew up in this certain way. It's one of the best gifts we can give anybody, and teaching somebody how to hold the space, but also how to listen, to call each other by their names is just a gift.
So wonderful. Oh, so wonderful. Heartfelt. My heart is full to know that this kind of healing is occurring. And as I, kind of think wow, we need this. And every institution that there is, not only in our nation, but internationally, we need to care for people who are hurting, and for people who we have deemed have hurt us. I mean, Fanta Davis says that what we do is that we punish people who hurt people, and then we punish them so they don't hurt people anymore. And that doesn't really work. It's not restorative. It's not the bridge of love. But what I see you doing here is holding space and connecting with each spirit, with each soul, and just having an authentic connection with them wherever they are on their journey in this world. It's magical.
Well, and I believe, Lisa, that we've all made mistakes, and we've all done things, said things that we're not proud of, or we wish we could take back. And somehow we keep walking forward. And that's been one of my own learning practices of how can I show up in a room and not hold somebody, for what they've done in their past, but to see them for who they are now. And I really continue to try and go back to that, of that we all have this opportunity. And I often think of it in the breath, that every breath is your opportunity to start over. Yeah. And that's the beautiful reminder, right? That the breath comes and goes pretty freely unless we're choked up or traumatized, but it's our
Mm-hmm.
reminder to let go, and something else can come in and something else can leave. And that's, one of the places that we often start too, of like, what's your breath doing? Or have you taken a breath since you've entered the room? Like, and there's laughter around that, but how can we, allow ourselves to change breath by breath?
Beautiful. Absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mm.
So if listeners are out there thinking like, how can I think this is awesome. I would love to do something like this, or
Mhm,
what
mhm.
can I do in my community? How can I help? What would you say?
I would say to take one of our classes. I would say you should come join our work. And really, just being a part of this Transformation Talk Radio, I'd love to gift any two listeners out there, two experiences for our 4-class series. So they're a $200 value, but let's make that an offer that there any two listeners. You can email me today, Nikki, Nikki at ontheinside.space. We run these 4-class series every month. So, you can pick a date and time that might serve you. Currently, we're working in 6 time zones with our current group:
Wow.
Morocco and Kenya and Zimbabwe and East Coast and West Coast of the US. So it's a wide range and mix of women coming together to learn, to share experiences, and to try and understand what's happening in our facilities. So yeah, join
Nice.
our work. Yeah.
Nice, nice. I will put that up. You know, and maybe people will get to you before I put it up. They probably
Okay.
will. I will put it up as a giveaway, but to be
Awesome.
able to lean into the work yourself and to be able to experience it and then pass it on to others. And
Hmm.
I love what you said about having holding space. And if we could remember that with one another,
Hmm.
that we could
Hmm.
hold that breath, hold that space for one another in our communities, we can grow the kind of communities that will lean all the way in with
Hmm.
those of us who struggle. And all of us have been there in some sense, some form, some fashion. But I love this. So, how old do you have to be to participate?
To be a legal aged adult, so 18 and up. Yeah, I would say. And then the opportunity really is, once you've taken our 4-class series, is to continue on with our monthly group. And again, it meets virtually, a 2-hour session once a month with different themes, from hope to grief to endurance, all once a month over Zoom. And then really the opportunity, what we're looking to build, Dr. Lisa, is a set of volunteers, team leaders that start to take this work out into other facilities, and that's sort of part of what we're working on with 2 of the women that we work with in Zimbabwe, of how do we continue to spread this work. And, each facility we work a little bit differently. The work in Oregon right now is ongoing. The work that we've created for the state of Wyoming is an 8-week class series that, ends with a certificate for all of the women that complete it. And
Mm,
then we're rotating through the entire facility doing this 8-week class series.
nice.
The work with the caseworkers, that's an ongoing monthly class that we lead them through. So, we sort of have really been looking at, like, how does this facility need to be served, and looking at each facility as an individual piece of a larger world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really wonderful. And when I think about, when you're talking about facilities where someone is thinking outside of a box,
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
to allow you to come in.
Yeah.
So I want to give a shout out to the facility administration who
Hmm.
says, yes, come on in and bring this light inside,
Hmm.
bring this healing inside. And so
Hmm.
what kind of administration? I mean, is there something particular you look for? How many doors are slammed?
Yeah, tons, Dr. Lisa. And really, this work moving outside of Oregon started with a friend that said, I want to volunteer. I love what you're doing. I love this idea. How about I start contacting facilities, all over the country, or where do you want to work? And I said, let's start with women. That's what we are. That's the stories that we know and can tell and
Mm-hmm.
share. Start with, like, creating a list of all of the women's facilities around the country, And that's what this friend did. And really, we kind of came up with a blind email together. And that's how we started working in Wyoming and Nebraska, is that these two facilities responded and said, let's get on the phone or set up a Google or Zoom meet. And we did that with all these facilities. And they said, great, when can you start? And so really, really interesting, right? I mean, Wyoming, the way we're working in Wyoming is we've not done volunteer training there, but because we're working virtually, that's been okay. Once we can start working inside facility, we'll do a volunteer training there. Yesterday, we did a volunteer training with the state of Nebraska. And then we also went and visited the facility in Nebraska this past year, which is part of their volunteer sort of training, that you have to visit the facility. So it was really interesting, even just yesterday, to be on this Zoom training there were 37 other people, all different ages and, demographics that want to work at that facility. And for me, I felt so encouraged to see like, wonderful, there's people that are going to be helping people that are serving time. We're not alone in this.
No, you are not alone. I am with you.
Thank you.
With you.
And there's that oneness, right, Lisa, of being our sister's keepers, whether they're inside or outside, strangers to us or faces that we know well.
That's right. And that's right. Absolutely. Wow. This has been so illuminating. I mean, Nikki, just as a person and not the executive director, you know how much I love you and care about all the work that you do. And it just warms my heart. And, and that's what this show is all about. Love and light. And again, Nikki, people can find you on Instagram and they can search for On the Inside. Such a beautiful organization. And we need more people to volunteer and to help with doing this work. Wow. Well, listen, if you're listeners, I'm just going to say what I always say. Remember to treat yourself like your best friend. If you want to contact me, you can go to my website, educationthroughengagement.com. All my info is there. I want to thank my guest today, Nikki Weaver, a healer, a shaker, a mover, the executive director of On the Inside, who brings love, creativity, and well-being inside women's prisons. I want to thank you for tuning in to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, living every day in peace. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here next time. Thanks. Thanks for listening to Love and Light with me, Dr. Lisa, everyday living in peace. You spent the last hour engaging in challenging and transformational conversations, all for the purpose of living a peaceful, joy-filled existence. Join me next time to continue growing in love and light through healing practices and acts of love. To learn more or work with me, Dr. Lisa, visit educationthroughengagement.com. That's educationthroughengagement.com. Remember, the world changes when we change by coming home to love. Tune in every second and fourth Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, here on transformationtalkradio.com.